Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to call a special meeting of the Shasta County Board of Supervisors for Wednesday, May 30 at 5 p.m. to order. We're grateful you're here, and if I understand the phone calls and contacts we've had, we'll have more people come wandering in as the evening progresses. While it is not shown on your agenda, I've asked Supervisor Morgan if he would lead us in the pledge as we call ourselves to order. If you would join us, please.
Will you all please stand and salute the great flag of the United States of America? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Morgan. We appreciate it.
You're welcome, Mr. Chairman.
So, folks, on your agenda, we have item number R1 under Board Matters, which is the workshop that you're attending. After that, it lists on the agenda public comment period open time. So as a conversation to my fellow board members, that should have been listed prior to item number R1. So I'm seeking the permission of the Board of Supervisors to move the open comment time to this time in our agenda, and we need a motion and a second to do so.
So move.
So we have a motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Before you got there, Supervisor Rickard.
I know I wasn't turned on.
Any questions or conversation? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. So the reason I did that is I did not want, if there happened to be someone in the room that wanted to address the Shasta County Board of Supervisors on items that are perhaps of county interest but not on our agenda this evening, I did not want you to have to wait through 2 hours worth of testimony and conversation to be able to come and address the board. You probably have some requests to address the board down there. So do we have anything that is not relevant to item number R1? No. So I'll just go ahead and ask it then. I'm assuming most of the people here want to address the board on item number R1. But if you'd like to address the supervisors on any item of interest to the county, this would be the time to do so. We will also call for all of those who have asked to address the board on R1. Very good. So we have, under due diligence, we've accomplished that. So we'll move to item number R1. That's what you're here for. On the agenda, it says conduct a workshop to discuss concerns and potential changes within the Department of Resource Management, receive comments from the public, and consider providing further direction to staff. So the first order of business on that tonight is to hear from the public. We are not going to have a lengthy presentation by this board or by our staff prior to hearing from the community. Tonight is designed specifically to hear from you. I would just say this as we open up this time of conversation. Each person that has requested is provided 3 minutes to comment. I would ask that you do so in a professional way. This has never been about individual people within the department, but it is about potential change and improvements and direction within the department. And we're hoping that you will step up and provide thoughts and processes along with your stories and perhaps suggestions that this board can consider to improve resource management and our planning department. Of course, at the end of that time, when we close that time of testimony and the board has its opportunity for conversation, the board may choose to hear from Mr. Simon or other staff members as we decide, and then we'll continue that conversation. It is our sincere hope at the end of the evening that we can do far more than simply listen to the communication from the community, that we will take clear and positive steps and perhaps direct Mr. Lees to interpret the needs and the direction and the desires of this board, because we'll just say to you, this board does have the legal authority and the responsibility to direct, cast vision, enact change, and make improvements within any area of Shasta County policy, process, and procedures. We're hoping that is the end result from this evening after we hear from the community. So with that, we're going to go ahead and open up our time to hear from you, the community. If you did not fill one of these out, there are a lot more of them in the back there. We're going to take them in the order received. We'd love to hear from you. And if you haven't addressed us before, the area mic will pick you up. Mary, you might want to adjust it so it's kind of pointing forward right now rather than up. It will pick you up. You don't have to lean into it and hold it. If you get uncomfortably close to it, it'll all kind of blast in all of our ears. So just talk. will be able to hear you, and if not, they'll adjust you a little bit louder so you can be heard well. With that, we're going to go ahead and call those who have requested. We'll start with Wyatt Paxton, please. Mr. Paxton, to be followed by Kathy Muse. So as I call you, that allows the next person to know that you're next up. You could step over to the queue here and then be ready. So, Kathy, that would be your opportunity to kind of head in that direction. Welcome.
Hello. My name is Wyatt Paxton. I'm a Pass County employee. I retired in 2009. Since I left in 2004, there's been quite a bit of change happened, or a lot of restrictions happened to the department. Research is done in a totally different way. Research now is being done on parcels that have plot plans that were approved with structures on them, and now they're being reopened. I've had several people hire me directly as a retired employee to try to work out these problems. Also, items that were cleared and that evidence is no longer in the county's possession, they make the new owner go get that information if it's still available. If not, they make them get permits, and they hold up all their construction until those items have been applied for. So a couple of the items that I would try to remedy would be, I asked the building department 8 months ago about if they had a written procedure for research on how to research a parcel, so all employees would be following the same rules. They do not. We had one in 2004 when I left. I don't know why that's changed. It seems like it would be something that you'd want to have in place. There should be an appeal process or a grievance process other than the expensive appeals board to get through a simple little item, whether an item needed a permit or whether alternate material can be used, that type of thing. I provided a list to the board. They can look at these at a later date. There's 8 of them. A person wants to pick up a permit that they've been told that it's ready to be issued. They have to wait in line, like everybody else, until all the projects, whether it's a new project or not, they have to wait in line to simply pick up a piece of paper that they applied for. Why can't they have an express aisle? Just if it's to pick up a permit, they can just give the permit number and just be given at the counter. That used to be the procedure in the past. Would stop the bottleneck. There's a planning ordinance that if you build a structure over 2,500 square feet, no matter what size your parcel is, if it's not zoned ag, you have to get an administrative permit. Costs $1,200 at the time. It might be even higher now if you want to make it 2,501 square feet, not detached. That just doesn't make sense. If I have 90 acres, I think I should be able to build an outside structure over 2,500 square feet. That ordinance is very cumbersome. It should have a lot size to be put onto that. And a complaint process. I've tried to file complaints. I can't get through the personnel department. I can't, they won't give you a form to fill it out. They want you to give a lengthy letter addressing who it is and what the circumstance was, and nobody responds. Thank you.
Mr. Paxton, thank you. And folks, as Kathy's coming forward, I just want to mention that Mr. Paxton did indeed supply a copy of his information to us, something that we can all read. Perhaps, I know I've already glimpsed at it right now. I want to also acknowledge that over the last several weeks, we have received a tremendous amount of communication. I'm going to assume that all supervisors are receiving a lot of communication. I've had the time to review those as well. Thank you, Mr. Paxton.
Yeah, I think, the way the public is, I think they would like to be involved in a process if you wanted to make some changes that I'm sure some contractors would like to have some input, because I've worked in at least 10 different jurisdictions, could help streamline. There's a better way to do this than the way it's being done in Shasta County.
Thank you. We appreciate your taking the time. So Kathy Muse, to be followed by Andrew Holm, please.
I've dealt with the planning department on 4 permits in the last 2 years. First permit took me over 10 months. I personally think I was blackmailed to get the final on it. It was an as-built shop. They said the mezzanine wasn't there. It was there. I had proof of it. They said I didn't have documented proof that was good enough. They would not give me the final permit without having a recorded piece of paper with the county that said if I ever sold it, I had to bring it up to the current code. It was an as-built building and has been there since 1984. The second time was an as-built kitchen. I was selling my house, so I went and got it legal. 7.5 months later, I received the permit after multiple letters of corrections because they kept changing the corrections on me. Right now, I have a brand-new house that I'm trying to get a permit on. I believe it's 8.5 weeks. Went down to Sacramento to another engineer to look at it after I have spent $7,000 to $8,000 to have it engineered by a certified engineer in the state of California. I got back a letter last night, finally, 21 correction letters. 5 of them on the items are the trusses that come from Systems Plus that are engineered and have been for years. I can't send my corrected plans to the county. I have to send them directly down to Sacramento. I'm not allowed to talk to the county of Shasta about them. I have to go down there first. Why do we spend all this money on engineered plans when we have somebody that doesn't even live in Shasta County telling us what we can do in Shasta County? Something needs to change because half of my contractors are now gone working other jobs. I don't have them to build my new house. Half the contractors in Shasta County are in other counties because you cannot get a permit in a timely fashion in Shasta County at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Appreciate you taking the time to address us today. Andrew Holm, you're next. Be followed by Brian Collier, please.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to come speak before you today. Talk to you today about an incident that occurred actually in 2015. We live in Cottonwood, and we decided we wanted to put an outdoor solar array on our property. So we went to a local contractor, we pulled our permits, and had our work begin. The first inspection that happened was with a gentleman named Daryl Jones. He came out to inspect our footings. He signed off on the footings. There were only 3 out of the 8 holes were even dug. No cement, no pipes in the ground, nothing. And when I asked him about this, I became really irritated, asked me, if I was trying to tell him how to do his job, and I explained to him, if I am required to pay the fee for the service, and the service is not rendered to me, that's actually not a service being provided, it's extortion. He became really excited about that. Anyhow, he came out later to do the second process, which was signing off on our trench. He signed off on the trench. There's only about 25% of it was even open. We had to talk again. This time we're starting to get a little bit heated. A month later, the project was wrapped up. He came out, signed off right there, project completion date. And I thought, fine, put it behind us, move on. A year later, I get a letter in the mail, courtesy notice that says that my permit is going to expire. Took my signed piece of paper back up to the building department, showed them the completion date. Young lady, very nice, took it back to the offices, assumingly to go see an inspector. Came back out about 5 minutes later and said that the permit was closed out, probably just an error. Again, I went about my business with some closure. Until 2 Mondays ago when Daryl showed back up on my property. Tried to say that our permit was now void. We produced this document with his signature. Mind you, I was present. I witnessed him sign this. He said, no, that's not my signature. I never signed it. It's a personal issue at this point. Asked if he could take pictures of our property. My wife, I was not home. My wife was there. I'm sorry, I'm a little upset right now. My wife said, no, you know what? We know the character of you right now. You need to leave. You're trespassing. He said, well, I'm an inspector. I'm going to do it anyway. Walks around my property, taking pictures. Again, we tell him you need to leave. Yes, the man has the audacity to tell my daughter, 21-year-old daughter, he says, I'm the inspector. I have permission. I could walk right through your front door right now. At this point, they both feel threatened. Now, I've made several phone calls to the building department, and much like everybody else, you don't get a call back. This is ridiculous. So I'm hoping that we can enact some change. Personally, I think that we need to hold the senior leadership accountable, terminate them, get rid of the bad apples, tear this department back down, and rebuild it so it serves the members of Shasta County and does not prey on them. Thank you for your time, gentlemen.
Thank you, Andrew. Brian Collier, to be followed by Jim Davis, please.
Hi, I'm Brian Collier. Live in Igo, California.
Brian, can I get you adjust? Okay. Hang on a second. That's what I was trying to ask him to do. Brian, thank you.
Brian Collier, Igo, California. I want to bring up one item that happened to us a few years ago. This was before the Clover fire. We were having some inspections done, and a young lady that came out said we had to have a permit and footings put under a shipping container. We had 3 of them to hold our equipment so things don't get stolen. And we're ag exempt, and we didn't understand all of this. We're new to the ranching field. We spent $2,500, put footings under there, and found out we didn't need it because the young lady that came out didn't know the rules. So education, number one, I think needs to happen within the organization of resource management. Two, I think we need a citizens committee, contractors, along with the county people, obviously, to review our fee structure. Our fees are expensive in this county. I heard a supervisor say, wait a minute, we can't talk fees right now. Our fees are good. They pay for the resource management. I understand we have to do that. But there could be other ways. Let's compare to other counties, other city, other jurisdictions to see about our fee structure. I'm not saying it's going to change, but let's take a hard look at it. We have the Builders Exchange here. Maybe they could help. Now I've just acquired another piece of property. It's a commercial property. It was built in 1883. It's known as the Igo Inn. I'm scared to death to come in there. Am I going to get everything in the world? Who knows what's happened since 1883? And then the addition onto the building in 1920. So I'm probably not going to go in and change anything in there. I'm just going to continue as it is. I only want to improve. I don't want somebody to tell me, hey, your 1883 building now needs sprinklers. You know, we need a way to come in, sit down, have a discussion. Here are the rules. Give me a sheet. Give me a book. I don't care what it is. Saying, this is what we expect. This is what you're going to be waived on. Then let's come up to the Clover Fire. I went to a meeting Tuesday. It was 7-8 days after the fire started. Big meeting, a lot of county people there, everybody patting each other on the back, really almost a waste of time. First, we were told fees would be waived. 3 weeks later, I've talked to my neighbors. Fees aren't going to be waived. They're going to be reduced. By the end, bottom line is, nobody's fees are reduced. There's a gentleman living on small farms. His house was burnt down. He moved a trailer there just so he could have a place to live. He was forced to remove that trailer, didn't have the money to rebuild, burned out. There has to be ways to bend some of the rules some of the times, depending on the situation. We need your help. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Jim Davis, to be followed by Melissa Hunt, please.
Thank you. I'm going to refer back to Kathy Muse. I'm the contractor that has been trying to get this through. And it not only is that particular project, but where she lives now, along with her neighbors, which used to be a 160-acre ranch. Well, it got divided up, and now when people go try to list their property, one of the neighbors is here. The house was the original house from 1950, I believe, and the barn was original. Well, the real estate people came out, and then he approached trying to bring this structures up to code so that it would sell without any legal ramifications. So basically, I had to go to if it weren't for Kathy Muse and some of the neighbors bringing to light that barn that was on his property was from 1950, it was brought to my attention that it was built too close to the property line, CDF rules, and that it needed to be permitted. Well, we had to go through the process of remedying that. Then on Kathy's house, we went through a steel structure that was used for pigs, and it was greater than 10 by 12. We got that resolved. But my point in this is that now we've gotten through, I've dealt with 3 neighbors out there, resolved most of the issues, and the other day one of them came through that there was a barn that was not permitted, or the barn was permitted or was not permitted, pardon me, originally. It was built without a permit, and then there were wings put on either side of it for shade. That came to the attention of the county, and they said the barn was permitted because we have a record of the barn being permitted. Then it came about that they said the wings are not permitted. I said, yes, they were. It's just somebody in clerical did not note it, because if you look at the time frame, the mobile home that was on it was taken off. The plot plan was drawn, and those wings were on, or that barn and the wings were part of that history of that plot plan. So they came out and said, barn approved, because to the inspector at that time, it was all inclusive. So brought that back, showed on Google Earth that this was part of that date when that house was permitted, part of that plot plan, and it was signed off as barn permitted. Well, an inspector doesn't know it's one barn, two sheds, it's all together. It's a completed structure. So anyway, then the county made the statement, the individual there, that basically they had to, that it was going to be accepted as permitted, but there'd be no refund of any fees. So the lady's upset over that. But anyway, we need to do something about the currently three code inspectors are looking over everybody else's backyard when they're standing on your property. And we need to get this permit process tightened up on new residents, because I'm out of an income for 4 months. So thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Melissa Hunt, to be followed by Mary Machado, please. Welcome.
Good evening. So, Melissa Hunt, Anderson City Council, but I've been contacted by constituents, so I'm bringing their stories to you. Not too long ago, we had resource management up in Shingletown for a public forum. A man in the audience stood up, talked about his problems with his neighbor that he was having, and the next morning, I received a phone call from him because code enforcement was up there on his property, not his neighbor's property, his property. He said this is a common occurrence that when you make a complaint, your property is investigated as well. So they were there on his doorstep, 9 a.m. Doesn't seem normal, doesn't sound normal. Seems like there's something needs to be attended to there. Another situation that I was contacted in as well, a resident in Millville contacted a contractor to do solar on his property, had the solar man come out, check out everything. They agreed on, all that stuff, price, contract, everything. They went, he said, we do everything. We go and get the permits and everything. He went and got the permits. At the building process, or in the getting the permit process, he experienced that planning pulled up the Google Earth, which I believe is not necessarily for commercial use, but I will stand corrected on that if it's true, but that right there needs to be attended to. He saw that there was an above-ground pool that had not been permitted. Not sure when that happened, when above-ground pools needed to be permitted. If it's a $25 Walmart pool, that's kind of amazing to me. And why weren't the ones that had been done before that happened, why weren't they grandfathered in? But because they saw on Google Earth that there was an above-ground pool, they said, I'm sorry, you have to attend, or they said to the contractor, the solar contractor, I'm sorry, we can't issue your permit for this property because they have to get their above-ground pool permitted first. So then they made the contractor go back to the homeowner, be the bad guy, and say, I'm sorry, I can't do this job because you guys haven't permitted your above-ground pool. So not only is the contractor losing business because he's lost the ability to put solar on this property, but he's also being the county's bad guy by going back and saying, you guys have to permit your above-ground pool. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Mary Machado, to be followed by Bill Walker, please.
A little shorter here. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to comment today. My name is Mary Machado. I'm the Executive Director of Shasta Voices, representing our more than 1,300 supporters advocating for sustainable economic future in the Shasta County area. Because I am limited to 3 minutes today, I sent a full 5-page report to the supervisors on May 25th for complete consideration, and we'll only be able to summarize today with some positive potential solutions for improvements to make the permitting and building process easier in unincorporated Shasta County. These were gathered last year when we sponsored a similar forum attended by the appropriate county officials who received the input then, seemed to agree with the solutions, but did not implement them. First one, make it easier for the general public building community to find information relating to permit and building process. Number 2, keep building and development impact fees updated with correct and consistent information on your website that does not conflict with the Department of Public Works, as it does today, or any other county department. 3, update and change unpermitted structure policies. 4, change policies to make it easier and attractive to make property repairs. 5, eliminate or change the current policy of performing an aerial imagery search of the entire property when an applicant comes in for a permit for one particular improvement. Limit the search to only that structure to be changed or improved. 6, implement different policies for repairs to any structure on the property and for new construction on the property, taking particular care not to use those structures needing repair as a means of preventing any new construction. Involve the building industry and some citizens at large in crafting these policies, together with the appropriate county officials, so that they become workable for everybody. 7, solar installation research agreements should mimic the intent of the state of California, which is that every city and county in the state is required to adopt a simplified procedure for residential solar panel systems. Why cloud the issue with the county's authority under law to require code compliance for any condition that may exist now or in the future on the parcel? The agreement ought to stick to its intended purpose, which relates to the installation of solar panels only, either on the rooftop of a structure or a ground mount. Number 8, the Development Impact Fee Program has not been revisited since its inception in July 2008. The fees just continue to increase each year under the inflationary clause, regardless of whether or not they are still accurate and compliant with calculations under the MFA. 9, excessive permit and zoning fees. County supervisors ought to conduct a long overdue review of all permit and zoning fees and involve private building and planning industries and some citizens at large in such a review so that the fees can be fair and equitable for everybody. 10, create an ombudsman at the permit counter as the contact person for all things permit process related, or one ombudsman for commercial projects, one for residential and one for commercial. And 11, measure customer service provided by your resource management department and reward those that do good work, provide further training for those who seem to need it. And last, the supervisors are the authoritative body who set policy and can implement new policy and change policies that are not working. It's time to change those policies that are so clearly not working. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary. And Mr. Walker is next. After that, Doug Jenke. But as Mr. Walker, before you get started, let's not start his clock yet. I wanted to make sure that the community knew that we indeed are in possession of all of those items that Mary was forced to rush through very rapidly, and I'm certain that we've all had a chance to read them. I'll just tell you this needs to be the path forward. That's my opinion. So we'll continue. Mr. Walker, please.
Chairman Baugh, members of the Board of Supervisors, I'm Bill Walker, and as you may know, I recently retired for almost 30 years working in the County Planning Division. My remarks today are based on my experience working for the county and also my personal opinions. First, I want to acknowledge that, yes, there are problems for builders and developers dealing with the County Department of Resource Management. The regulations may be too cumbersome, the processing of applications may take too long, and the fees may be too high. And it is easy to blame County Resource Department staff for these problems. However, I personally know almost everyone currently working in the department, and I know that these are some of the most dedicated, hardworking people I've ever worked with. I know that they are doing their very best to try to implement the county rules and regulations. These problems are not caused by county staff. So what is the real source of the problems? The county general plan was a pretty good plan when it was adopted, but that was 34 years ago. That was before we used personal computers, before we had the internet, and before Google Earth. All of the general plan maps were hand-drawn with pens on Mylar. Our general plan may be one of the most out-of-date county plans in California. Getting to the zoning ordinance, much of the zoning ordinance was originally written in the 1950s and 1960s. It's been tweaked a number of times since then, but that has just made it more lengthy, more inconsistent, more confusing, and hard to interpret. I've spent a great deal of time in discussions with other planners trying to figure out what the heck does the code read. Much of it is out of date with current planning thinking. As far as the development standards, they appear to date back to the time of the interstate highway system in the 1950s, when the main objective was to make sure that roads were more comfortable for cars. Only the county building codes are current. I think that all of the county staff would agree that updating, simplifying, and clarifying these plans, codes, and standards, as well as establishing better staffing levels, would go a long way towards simplifying, expediting, and maybe even reducing the cost of permit processing. Who can make this happen? Who adopts the general plan? The board does. Who adopts the zoning plan? The board does. Who adopts the development standards? The board does. Who sets the staffing levels? The board does. Who sets the fee schedules? The board does. So who can make these changes happen? Only you can. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Great observations. Much appreciated. Doug Jenke, to be followed by Mark Fader, please.
Good evening. Doug Jenke, broker, realtor, former president of the Shasta Association of Realtors. And the current regime that is in process of this department has been very punitive to our clients and to your constituents. They go out and find people for things that they weren't even on the property for. I could go on and pile on, but that would be kind of embarrassing. You want to know some advice. Here's what I give. First off, get 4 people from the community. General contractor who's on that side of the counter dealing with the misconceptions that are passed on. 2, a civil engineer. Why is it when a set of plans is submitted with an engineer stamp, do people who don't have engineering get to review those? 3, realtor. We get the phone call when an owner 5 owners ago built a patio and it wasn't permitted and it wasn't disclosed, and our people are now getting red tagged and fined. 4, get a developer. They're going to bring the money in that you get to spend. Find out what it's going to take to get that budget moved. Some of the questions you might want to ask of your next person, and I will say it bluntly and freely, do not move the next person line up in this business. Your guy has supported the current regime of punishment, and he needs to go. Hiring advice. Are you pro-growth? Does the current county fees seem punitive, and how would you fix them? The county building department is currently punishing people. How would you fix that? 4, if a licensed civil engineer brings in a set of engineered stamp plans, why do people who are not engineers get to review them? In many other states, they can walk in, the plan is reviewed. If it's got a stamp, they get their building permit that day. Why can't we do that? Next, would you use common sense, not bureaucracy, to resolve problems? Right now, you guys review to the book. Nobody thinks about what it is. And I will be honest, the name that was brought up earlier, a certain inspector, I've crossed swords with that gentleman. He is unpleasant, and he gives you guys a bad name. Moving on. I think we should remember this moving towards the finish of my speech here. This country is supposed to be of the people, for the people, and by the people. Right now, it's of the bureaucrat, by the bureaucrat, and against the people. We need to change that. You guys need to get somebody in the resource department that actually wants to work and make it better. Please put common sense, non-bureaucrat in the position. Let's leave poverty flats, and let's move on to prosperity plateau. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jenke. And Mr. Fader, before you begin, you can just nod yes or no. I've had so many emails, I don't recall getting that list. Did you supply that to us?
I made that up today because I
Okay. Would you be willing to send it to the entire board? Thank you very much. Mark Fader, to be followed by Andy Main, please.
Good evening. I'm Mark Fader. I'm a local designer, born and raised here in Reading. 63 years old. I've been in construction for 43 years, and I've been designing houses for 25. So I deal with all the building departments in the whole North State on a daily, regular basis, and it's gotten a little out of control. At present, one of the biggest problems is the turnaround times. I have a plan that I just submitted in here to get the first round of plan checks for a single family residence. It took 11 weeks, 1 day, 78 days, 21.37% of a year to get the first round. Now it's going to go back, and I'm going to wait for another couple of weeks, and, I might go through a third plan check. Now, these people are already gotten their loans locked in, and they're paying interest on big houses here, and we're waiting for something that should take 1 to 2 hours, and we're at, several months. It only takes me a week to draw the plans. A plan check should take no more than 2 hours. So how do you get from 2 hours to 70 some odd days. And like I say, this is the first plan check. So we've been sending him to this Bureau Vista. I don't know what the pronunciation is, but I've had 3 plans go through the same company within the last 2 months. I take all the notes and details from each one and put them on the next plan. Every time they come back, they've changed the notes and the details. So there's no consistency. Big thing right there. There needs to be consistency. Going through the same thing with the Reading, there's a couple of things that could happen. One of them is for single-family residents, there should be a detail page. We used to have one with Ochoa and Sheehan, worked great for years, that had the basic, there's 12 details and general notes and a compliance statement. One sheet, same sheet, none of this checking all the details and notes for every plan. It just, that could solve a lot of problems. So let's see, the lack of the consistency. That's how I make my living, is doing these plans. I should have thousands of plans that are ready that I can go and flop right down and people go in and get permits for. But every time I get one of these plans come back, it's a ripple effect. You change one thing on my plans, it junks everything else. Not completely junk, but I have to go through and do major remodels. Part of this comes from the state. They change the codes every 3 years. What the heck? It takes me like a better part of a week to fix one plan to bring it up to the new code. When in actuality, when you walk out and you look and touch the finished house, it's paperwork. There's not that much different in the house. A house is a simple process. We've been doing a lot of them. It shouldn't be that difficult to get a plan to do a house. And then when I was with Ochoa and Sheehan, we figured out for every house we do, we have 112 families that are following us through, relying on us to generate money for their income so they can buy food, prosperity, the economy. So when we get to the building department,
So, Mr. Faber, your time expired. Maybe you can draw us to a conclusion, though?
Okay. You need to simplify the process. It needs to be much easier, much quicker. Plan checks should be within 1 week. Turn them around. Rechecks should be over the counter or 1 day. Just make it a lot faster. Okay, we'll leave it at that. I'll send the rest.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. Andy Main, to be followed by Dale Wall, please.
Chairman Baugh, Supervisors, thank you so much for having this forum tonight. This is democracy in practice, and I'm glad to see everybody here. I'm Andy Main. I'm a local business owner. I've been before you before to talk about the efforts that I've been going through in my business to put internet service out into the remote areas of Shasta County where people can't get high-speed internet. The current zoning ordinances require that you were built 40 years ago, as Bill Walker said. They're outdated. The cost of getting a permit and processing a permit and the time is 5 times more than what it costs to just put one of these towers up. I can put a tower up for $5,000, and to get a permit under the current ordinance, it would cost me $5,000 for the application fee and unheard of expenses regarding studies. The process needs to be simplified. I put in an application for a zoning ordinance over a year ago. We've made no progress, none. I'd like to get it on your agenda so that we can have staff take a look at it and bring some common sense down so that we can get high-speed internet and help the economic growth of this community so that Shasta County can flourish. The second part is my comments up here is part of speeding up the process. I'm involved with Palisadro Park out in Palisadro. In October, we put in plans for an improvement out there, and it took 5 months to get a permit for a 250 square foot structure. It took way too long. And at the very end, it kind of fell down on its face in an effort that said, oh, we need more information. We need engineered stamps. We'd already provided the engineered stamps, and with a couple of phone calls, we were able to take care of it, and I'm really grateful for that. But it does seem as though the process is broken when we take permits in. We don't get responses back after 1 week, 2 weeks. They tell us 12 weeks, and then it becomes 20 weeks. Something's not working right. We need to speed up the process, simplify the process, and make changes. As Bill Walker said, we need to simplify the process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. So, folks, I had originally called Dale Ball next, but Casey Dollar is after him, and they're sending pitching instructions here to me. Mr. Dollar had notified me he's actually supposed to be at his movie premiere tonight, so I'm going to take Mr. Dollar next. Thank you.
How are you guys doing? So, as you said at the beginning, the people in the offices have been amazing. I have a unique situation because I flip houses, and there's days where I'm in the permit office of Anderson County and Shasta Lake City in the same day, and the difference, it just blows my mind. And the county I have the most issues with because of the time. I'll go get a permit in Anderson to do to legalize unpermitted enclosed patio, something like that. And they're like, here you go, no problem. Thank you very much for fixing up this house. In county you go in, and they say, get back to me in 31 days, and we'll tell you what parts you need to switch, and then start again. And so what I would really like to see is a streamline. I mean, it's a small community, and I'm doing houses in every town. It's a 20 square mile area, but there's times where I'm just like, oh, that house is in the county. No, I'll go ahead and get the one in Shasta Lake City, or I'll go ahead and get the one in Anderson. And I shouldn't have to pick and choose houses by how long things are going to take. And, most of the houses I do is on hard money loans, so it's a high percentage rate. So when I know if I do this house, I can't even start that remodel for 30 days, that's going to cost me an extra $3-4 grand than if I pick up the one in Shasta Lake City. So that's one of the big ones. And other than that, the people at the front desk, they're always real smiley and helpful. They appreciate what I do. And there is a couple of bad apples. There's permit guys that show up, and I have a big smile on my face, happy to see them. Other ones, I hear it's going to be them, and suddenly I have an appointment I forgot about and have to cancel it because I just don't want my day ruined by an inspector. And so another thing is, there's times where you really debate how much you want to fix a house, because there's times where, you'll see some mouse-chewed wires or something, or just some dirty wires in the garage, and I'll take the time to replace them. It doesn't change the value of the house, but I do it, just for safety reasons, things like that. And I'm all happy inspectors come up and they're like, oh, we need you to draw up all that new wiring you put in. And it's in exactly where I took it out, and I had my, licensed electricians do it, but then I have to drop what I'm doing, go back to the city with drawing of where the new wire is because it had a mouse chew on it, or it was just dull. And so there's a lot of little things that I know I do them because I have to sell the house and I have a reputation. I don't want it to come back on me. But I can see how people can, trying to get away with not doing that stuff because of they don't want to deal with the permit. But, I have really high standards, so I know I overspend on rehabs just so everything is right. And I can see people letting things skate because of those issues. So I wish all the permit offices could get together, have a standard of what, one time. So I know what I'm in for no matter what office I go to, basically. But thank you for your time.
Thank you, Casey. So Dale Ball to be followed by Enar Diaz.
Board, staff, thank you for time. I didn't plan on speaking tonight, but it looks like a couple of contractors that were supposed to be here texted me that they couldn't make it here. So I'm just threw something together here real quick. Out in the business world, where most of us all have to make our living, no matter what, the customers are always right. We have to accommodate. We have to work around their whatever they want. But it kind of seems like with the county bureaucracy, the customer's always wrong and until they prove it otherwise. We've got people wasting way too much time on things that should not be wasted. If a building is pre-engineered, that should be an over-the-counter permit like it is in most every other county in this state. It seems like the permitting process has become a cash cow for the county. Once somebody pulls a permit and that guy gets on their property, the chicken coop's wrong, the pool is wrong, you've got an overhang on your barn, now your propane tank's too close to that. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. I've heard hundreds of stories in the last couple of weeks since you tagged me in a bunch of social media posts. And honestly, a lot of contractors would have loved to come here. They know they'll get blackballed. They know it. I've even got a recording, which I think Mr. Lease has heard about at one point in time, of one of our lovely permit people telling a guy if he causes any more problems, he will be blackballed. This attitude is just not acceptable. These solar contractors, I was going to go into a little more, but I think some people covered a lot of that. I have 3 different friends that were going to come here that do solar, and they all are dealing with the same problem. They can't get the permit going because the overhang on the chicken coop or makes it 160 square feet instead of 140 square feet. But if you go measure the chicken coop, it's really only 140 square feet. But they're Google Earthing it and trying to nail the people on this. Solutions. How do we fix this? Same way you do in the real world. People that don't want to toe the line, you fire them. What is the solution? 7 miles south in the city of Anderson. Every contractor I talk to says they're pleasant to work with. Maybe we could hire one of those guys to consult and figure out the problem.
Thank you, Dale. Enart to be followed by Jim Rickard, please.
Good evening. My name is Zaynard Diaz.
There you go.
Boy. Good evening. My name is Zaynard Diaz.
We were testing you, Enart.
Yeah, I just, I'm getting old. I'm owner of Diaz Associates, a entitlement consulting environmental firm. I came here to talk about planning, and other than Bill Walker and a little bit Andy Main, we really haven't talked much about planning, which leads me to one of the conclusions that I've been espousing for quite a few years now. You need to separate the building department from the planning department as part of resource management. I think that you have an excellent building official, you have an excellent planning director. However, the planning director overseeing a building department is very, very difficult. So people aren't being able to, I'm surmising people aren't able to do their own individual tasks overseeing their departments, because I feel for Rick Simon having to deal with not only building but also environmental health, air quality. These areas, given the plethora of the codes that come down from the state of California, I mean, if the public understood what the building codes are requiring, and that's one of the things I think that you need to get out to people, that the codes in California are just onerous. And I review some of the codes, and I sit there and I scratch my head, and I'm working with them. But we need to have a workshop like you're doing today that deals with planning. Building is really not within my area, and I'm not prepared to comment on it as much, other than to say that there does need to be education, and I think that department should be split off. But let's talk briefly about planning, and I think Bill Walker hit upon this. I'm going to disagree that the general plan needs to be updated, because the general plan is supposed to be more of an overall big picture. Somebody likes to use, I think it was one of the meetings that Mary Machado held, the 30,000-foot elevation as far as looking at things. You need to update the zoning code, and that's where you get the 2,500 square feet versus a 2,501 square foot, and all of a sudden it kicks it into that requirement. That needs to be updated. Your public works standards need to be updated. The zoning code allows for planned development where you can reduce the street right-of-way. Public works tells you, no, it's got to be 60-foot right-of-way, or it's an absolute. So we need to have a forum like this that deals with development and planning. And then this is great for the building, but there's a whole group of us that aren't here because it appears that it's primarily building-oriented. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Enard. So Jim Rickard to be followed by James Burchill. and my apology for destroying your last name.
Hello, I'm Jim Rickert. I'm a farmer from eastern Shasta County and a fourth-generation resident of Shasta County. And I see us working along at this with making it very cumbersome. People move to Shasta County to have a rural lifestyle in a lot of ways in the county area. And it seems like we spend an awful lot of staff time on building little buildings that have been building unpermitted. Somebody's builds a hog pen, and they've got a shelter over to keep them from getting sunburned during the hot summer. And next thing we know, we've got to deal with all of that. We have to pay a fee to remove it or whatever. Seems to me like we ought to have some kind of an easy way to not spend all the staff time on these little tiny structures. We ought to just have something that you can go online. Yes, it's an unpermitted structure. We're housing livestock, or we've got a car parked in it or whatever. People aren't living in it. You just go out and you pay a $100 fee, you pay it online, you bring it in, and you're just done with it. And the staff can actually be used for something that's really productive and helping to grow the county and really important things rather than, quite how many angels can dance on this pinhead. So that's my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, James. And James, would you pronounce your last name for us, please? Birchall, to be followed by Angie Walford, please. Thank you.
My name's James Birchall. I'm a third-generation resident. Went off into the military, spent 8 years active, 3 years inactive. Came back, started trying to devote my talents to what I was trained for in electronics technology. I started designing solar systems in this area for various contractors and have designed over 150 solar systems for Shasta County. It's very heartbreaking when you're dealing with, retired gentlemen who are just trying to reduce their electric bills, and they're being harassed over a shed that's on a permanent foundation when that's been existing, or when you clarify that, then it's the back patio, even though it doesn't have a roof structure on it. And because they say it can support a snow load, even though it can't support hardly any snow load on 2 inches of timber. Then it's the garage. And this is all one individual that they just took through the ringer from one issue to the next and strung them along. And then there was other issues with other individuals where they were cited for above-ground swimming pools or a barn that they didn't have a record for a permit on. And even after, you jump through the hoops and you show that the homeowner has been paying taxes on the back patio, or you produce a aerial photography of Shasta County showing the garage structure that's been in place since 1968, it's very difficult, even dealing with the obstructionist attitude and mindset of the department. And personally, I don't think it's a management issue, as more of a subversive ideology. Now that I'm a property owner in Shasta County, I'm starting to experience these issues firsthand, in developing my own property. And a large part of what I do is based online, completely online, in a 21st century style economy, where I'll design solar systems, even in other states, in Maine, Texas, Florida, or I'm designing websites in California or Colorado or Idaho. Biggest problem I see is the interpretation of the code is very vague in many instances, where they will make interpretations that are not in line with the design of the code, even in its original context. Thank you.
Thank you, James. So as Angie is coming up next, after that is Tom Twist. I want to mention at this time, before we start the clock on Angie, that we're coming down to the last few people who have submitted requests to address the board today. So if you still want to address the board, I go back there and grab one of those and take it up to our clerk right now, because we're going to call the end of the process here in just a few minutes if we don't have any other speaker requests. Angie, welcome.
Hi, my name is Angie Walford, and I'm a real estate broker, have been since 2002. Throughout the years, I have worked with dozens of developers and several homeowners that were attempting to build a home, remodel, or split a parcel. Over the years, I have heard countless times that people would never work with the county again. They stated they stopped working in Shasta County because of the constant harassment and the changes from week to week. Over the last few years, the problems seem to increase. I currently have one client that has been trying to split a property for well over a year and a half, and the guidelines have changed repeatedly. I currently have a client that is being drugged through the ringer by the county. He first bought a home in November of 2017. He lives next door to the home and wanted to stop the squatters from staying there. He wanted to fix the home up and assist in cleaning up the neighborhood, hoping to get the best possible neighbors. The previous owner had passed away and squatters took over the home. My client finally got the opportunity to purchase the home through the county public administrator in November. He worked with the county to do the required repairs. He put every dollar he had into the home, every dollar, well over what he expected to put in, and he made sure everything was done correctly. He tore down items as instructed by the county. He had the fire department sign off on the home as instructed by the county. Just before finishing the home and getting ready to list the home, he was told that there was a fine on the home for over $15,000. This was never disclosed, and there was no lien. I contacted the title company so they could research the property, and they confirmed that the property never had a lien. The county provided my client with a letter that was sent to the previous owner long after the previous owner passed away, stating that they may lien the property for an abatement lien. Again, they never liened it and never mentioned this during the sales process. I spoke with the county, as did my client, and he was told to sell the home, he had to pay the fine. He was able to get the fine reduced, but still had to pay thousands. This fine was not his fine, wasn't a lien, and wasn't disclosed. Yet they wouldn't allow him to sell the home without it being paid. They also said it couldn't be paid through escrow. He had to pay it prior. My client had to borrow the money to pay the fine, as he has financially stretched himself to complete this home. We then put the home on the market and had great response when I received a message from one of the inspectors, a county inspector stating that he saw that the house was for sale and that he has an order to demo part or all of the home. When I called him back, he said that they had already been to court for a demo order. I told him that we have been working with the county. He first stated that we hadn't, and he was extremely rude. Then he checked the notes and saw that we had worked with the county. Some of our conversations were noted, but not all of them. I asked him why no one had ever disclosed this teardown order, and he stated it was issued for the previous owner and they didn't have to. He then stated it didn't transfer with the sale of the property. I asked him why he was calling me, stating that it could be torn down if the order didn't transfer. He said there is already an order, so if anything is wrong with the home, they can return to have the order enforced. So it's something that if something wasn't permitted, if someone grew marijuana, if someone ever did anything, they could return and tear down the home. I told him that we have been working with the county on what was permitted and what was grandfathered in, etc. There are areas that were built prior to permits. The county has been in contact with my client and told him what needed to be done throughout the whole process. He then stated again that it can be torn down at any time, and he would check on what was going on, but there would always be that risk in the future. No one had mentioned the lien, yet everyone was willing to enforce it after the fact. Everyone has put obstacles in front of my client, who is trying to improve the home, stop squatters, and help to improve the area. The county has been misleading, dishonest, and created multiple obstacles. The story is all too common, but this story is costing my client everything he has. The county doesn't have the right to play God. It needs to be proactive and find solutions. We are driving away developers. We are driving away revenue. We are driving away families. We have to bring people back here, and this whole process has to change.
Thank you, Angie. So as Mr. Twist comes up, Angie, I'm going to assume you haven't gotten a copy of the response from the county. Angie went to bat and turned this in to me, and I pass it on for analysis. And the county is going to refund the fine that was paid, agreeing with you. I don't know the rest of the outcome, but I wanted to thank you for taking the time to address this board today and also to forward your information. Tom Twist, to be followed by Phil Powell, please.
Mr. Bob, Board of Supervisors, thank you. Just wanted to suggest to the Board of Supervisors that you might consider an amnesty program for the myriad of properties that are located in the county which are not permitted, which have well-built structures. The amnesty should not waive a permit fee, but it should waive the penalty fee and any administrative fees. That's about all I have to say.
Thank you, Tom. Bill Powell. And to be followed by, thank you, Todd Harris.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm a county employee. I have been with the county for about 27 years, and I think most everybody knows me, see me working around the facilities. Our issue started probably about 3 years ago. I'm going to try and cram 3 years of grief and frustration into 3 minutes. I believe it started when we tried to help somebody that had lost her husband, lost her home because of losing her husband. She was legally blind, so we said, come to our house, stay in a trailer till you get back on your feet. I suspect, I don't know who, because they won't tell me, but I suspect I know who called. Anyway, we had an inspector show up at our property unannounced, and I was at work, my wife was home. He proceeded to walk our property, start checking off stuff, and then left. And we got something in the mail saying, you've got a bunch of issues. We bought the place in 1988, and all the stuff that was written up basically was there. All the people are gone. They've passed away. I can't go back. So anyway, in trying to make a long story short, we've been trying to comply, trying to get things taken care of. And one thing I'd like to say that when somebody comes back in, they should be able to deal with the same person and not be sent to somebody else, because then they start the process all over again. That's a big hassle. There's some other things I'd like to say, but I can't remember them right now, so I'll go ahead and go.
Bill, you did very well. Thank you. Todd Harris, to be followed by John Carr, please.
Thanks for having me. A few points to make. I've never pulled a permit, so I don't have a horror story to share, but I sure hear them. I own Harris Metalworks, it's a structural steel fabrication outfit. So we have the luxury to work for some very successful people here in town. Each one of them, all those guys that own the car dealerships up and down Cypress, have nothing but horror stories to say about the process to upgrade, improve, the whole thing. Every last one of them. You may be excluding a few of them, but there's definitely a problem. There's something that's broken majorly here. Now, for example, in the Reading Police Department, I was a structural steel contractor chosen to do that job. The steel joists alone, that's the Steel Joist Institute of America, not Reading, California, or anything like that.
So Mr. Harris, I'm going to get him to stop the clock for a second. We're Shasta County, and you're addressing issues within the city of Reading.
Okay.
You have issues you want to address, and so you don't lose your time within the county.
Okay, we'll focus on metal buildings.
Very good, thank you.
The metal buildings they're a pre-manufactured metal building, so I've heard that mentioned several times. The engineering comes to Shasta County, and then it's looked at by someone that's not an engineer, but the stamp is there, and then that goes through plan check, and revisions are made, and that's where the process and the challenge begins, I think, for a lot of the building that goes around in here, you know. And so I think that's a problem. I'm beginning to do a shop on my property, and we'll see how that shakes down, but we're going to see how that goes. I think the system is definitely broken. Solutions, I think that's up to you guys to sit back and evaluate all the comments and deal with that, you know, and we'll see where that goes. But thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Todd. John Carr, to be followed by Ginger Solito. And Ginger is the last request I have this evening.
Good evening. My name is John Carr, and I, first of all, want to thank you for having this. I think these things should go on more often. It's obvious. We need citizen input on a regular basis into our county government, and there needs to be a facility to do that, and this is the facility. The citizens have paid for this room in this building. We should be able to use it to talk to our supervisors on a regular basis about things that are bothering us. As far as the planning department goes, I've worked with the planning department on and off for many, many years. As most of you know, I've been a realtor for 38 years in this county. There have been times when it's been much more friendly to work with than others, much easier. Generally, all of the time, the counter people that I've worked with have been very, very nice to work with, so I commend them. And some of them are in a real bad spot because they're enforcing things that I think they really don't want to enforce or believe in. And I've listened to these comments, and things do take too long. Our county employees from the top down, including yourselves, need to realize that we are the consumers. We're the taxpayers. We're the consumers. We're using your services, but we pay your wages. And everything needs to be consumer friendly. It needs to be, how can we help you? How can we make this happen? How can we work with you to accomplish what we need to accomplish here? The economics of the situation are terrible. I recently did a parcel map that I haven't done for years. $10,000. $10,000 for a rezoning on a 30-acre parcel to get 2 parcels out of this parcel. And it was general planned 5-acre minimums. $10,000. There's not $10,000 worth of work in that permit. I was shocked. And unfortunately, I had buried myself in this property and had to go forward. You know, it's untenable for most people. If you're an old citizen in this county, you've got 20 acres, you need to sell off 2 5-acre parcels in order to supplement your retirement. You've been a taxpayer in the county for years. You should not have to go through these kinds of processes to do that. I recommend that we do a regular meetings like this. I'd love to see a Citizens Advisory Council to the Planning Department. And I also want the Board of Supervisors to set up an email for people where I could sign up. We used to have this in the county, and I can get emails, advisories on meetings that are going to happen or on supervisors' agendas. And I'll leave it at that for right now, but thank you very much, and do this more often. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So our last request for the evening is from Ginger Salido. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Baugh, and Board of Supervisors. Wasn't planning on speaking. I'm going to be real brief and not cover all of my details, but the most ridiculous ones. We bought a distressed, falling down, just a disaster of a horse ranch just south of the Reading Airport in 2002. It had not been occupied for almost 18 years. On my dad's advice upon purchasing it, he said, the first thing you do, honey, is get ag exempt permits on these barns because they need a lot of work. And if you ag exempt them, you won't have to permit just basic repairs. I did that the first 10 months that we lived there. I was told that we could have 3 ag exempt permits, but 2 of the barns they would not ag exempt permit. So when I asked them why, they said because people go in those barns. My answer to that was I have yet to have a horse or cow that could take care of themselves in a barn without a human being. That would be my first common sense issue. Fast forward a little bit. Please understand, at this point, my husband's 78. I am 63. We have been hardworking taxpayers our entire lives. We came to clean up this farm, and I had a dream to have a farm where abused children could come. We weren't trying to do anything malicious, and we weren't trying to do anything illegal. Yet every time I approached the building department, I was treated almost like a criminal. And I don't appreciate that, because I have always worked hard and we have always paid our taxes. So through some issues with about 6 neighbors out of 66 neighbors, when they go to the county with a complaint, the first thing the county looks at is all your building permit or your buildings. Obviously, 2 of mine, because people go in them, are not permitted. So now I go back to the county. How do we resolve this? Well, now, Mrs. Salido, you need a use permit. Okay, I'm willing to stay I want to operate under the authority over me. So we start working through the use permit process. That's a whole nother enchilada. But let me just tell you some of the ridiculous parts of that. The very first thing we did, 2014, January, we paid all of our consultants, engineers, drew up plans, went in, paid the $6,000 to the county for a commercial use permit application, 2014. I have not heard from them since. I got one letter, had the fire department came out, insisted that we had to have a fire hydrant and reservoir to support it because I had children from our county out there. Yet we have a public school just a half a mile from us that not only doesn't have fire hydrants, but no overhead sprinklers. So my question to them was, why am I being held to a standard that you're not even holding our schools to? There's a lot of holes, and I just pray and hope that we will get them fixed. I'm still working on permitting my barns, but now we're looking at $87,000 for a permit because of the impact fees that my livestock have on our roads and our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ginger. And she would not sing her own praises, so I'm going to do it. Ginger and her husband own and operate Exodus Farms, a private nonprofit that blesses disabled children, children with disabilities through the use of horses. And we thank you for what you do for the community. So, folks, that is the last of the requests that we have, and it's been quite a pile. I'm going to first start by saying thank you to each speaker. You did a great job of presenting challenges, sharing your story, and doing so in a well manner. I appreciate that and the decorum you offered here this evening. I appreciate also the many suggestions that were made. So at this point, we're going to have the board itself, we're going to have a discussion in front of you, because this is how government works. So this will allow us a time to have conversation, and I would appreciate if you would give us the same opportunity to share and ask those questions as we all gave to you. It's not my intention to open the conversation with the public back up again, but to continue now with this part of the meeting. And I would just say to the board, you have an opportunity to hear from Mr. Simon and anybody that you'd like to hear from. You're the Board of Supervisors. You can do whatever you want to do this evening as we discuss this and work our way through it. I would suggest this for you, Mr. Simon, rather than standing in defense of every issue that was brought up. I don't think it's necessary. They're stories, and you could individually choose to have conversations with any of those folks that want to come and talk to you. Today is a bigger picture. What is a path forward for this department without getting into the minutia of the individual challenges that have been presented? But what is the overall picture? What can we do for Shasta County? What can we do to move forward? What can we do to remove challenges? I can't remember who said it, but to open the county for business and welcome people in. That's, I think, the goal here this evening. So we'll go to the board and ask you first before we ask Mr. Simon to come forward. Do you have questions that you want? Maybe that would be a better way to direct individual questions to whomever, maybe to Mr. Lees, maybe to Ruben Cruz, maybe to Mr. Simon. We'll start with the board and see what your pleasure is. I have a request from Supervisor Rickert and then to Supervisor Morgan, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Baugh. I just want to thank everyone for coming here tonight. I think that this is a display of democracy in action, and I think it's really important that we have these kind of forums on a regular basis. This is our second one in the last few months, and we're going to have another one next month. So thank you all for taking the time to come here. When I ran for office, I've been on board for 17 months, but when I ran for office, my predecessor continued to emphasize in all of our forums that her number one issue was the planning department, the building planning department. And most of the work that my husband and I do is we're ag exempt, so I don't have quite the complications that a lot of you people have had. But I did find as over the last 17 months that I represent District 3. It's a huge geographic area. It's a lot of rural residents. And so there are a lot of outbuildings. There are a lot of small structures, and it gets complicated for people that do live out in the country sometimes. And so I know I have contacted Mr. Simon more than most of the supervisors just because I seem to have a lot more issues. But I do think that we do need to see some changes. I think that we need to really work on some of our customer friendliness. I do think that that's something I've heard. I'd like to of course, speed up and simplify the process. One thing I have heard from various people that we need to really work on equitable treatment of people as they come in the door. I've heard anecdotally stories of people, if they know somebody in the department, they get kind of bumped ahead and those kinds of things. That's not really what Shasta County supports, that kind of treatment. I've also thought that we need to have a handbook for the public. I think we need to spell out so that everybody kind of understands the basic information that they will have to be familiar with if they're going to move forward on building a house or a barn or whatever, so that they can educate themselves as fully as possible, so that we're not spending time at the counter having the Shasta County employees, explaining every little nuance to them. And the chicken coop, I had my chicken coop story, and I actually went out and measured the chicken coop. And I've in our personal work as appraisers over the years, I've measured a lot of buildings, and they told these people that it was 120 square feet. I got out the tape measure; it was 96 square feet, but it had some overhangs, and that's where Google Earth gets to be a problem. So we need to kind of figure out how to solve that problem. And it was another case of, they went to this building on the property and said, no, this needs to be torn down. And so these are the kinds of things. And basically all they wanted to do was build a barn. And they had, I think, 10 acres. They want to build a barn. And so here's something, we're standing in the way of making some progress and moving ahead for these people. I think the fee structure needs to be looked at. I have brought up in the past, I had a constituent come to me about changing the zoning on his forest land. He was told it was going to be around $10,000 to change the zoning, and he checked other neighboring counties, and they basically the neighboring counties, the fee structure ranged from $2,000 to $3,000. And so that to me is a red flag that we need to really address our fee structure and work on those kinds of issues. I recently went to Wairika. We're trying to work on an agritourism ordinance for Shasta County, and I went to Wairika. They have formulated an agritourism ordinance that they're about to, I think they by now have probably presented it to their planning department. And what was so impressive to me was there was a citizens committee that had formed, very knowledgeable, articulate farmers and ranchers and people that work in produce, and several of them I knew. I guess that's why they got my foot in the door, and I came home with a sample ordinance. I was pretty excited about that we can, as a framework, that we can continue to work on ours. But the point is, I saw citizens in action, and I saw them, they were making some really productive, thoughtful decisions about how they wanted their county agritourism ordinance to function. And I think that was a good example that we all need to learn from, and we need to embrace that. So I'll probably make further comments, but I just wanted to kind of summarize some of the things that I have experienced, and it's my intent that we're going to make some changes, and we're going to make Shasta County a better place for people to do business. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Rickert. Supervisor Morgan to be followed by Supervisor Kehoe, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, too, would like to thank everybody tonight for filling this room, not completely, but the interested parties. And they had some good comments, and I've written down some of them. The main thing here is I'm hearing a lot about zone codes and changes and the fees for the zone. And I think that that's something that we need to look into. I really do. Apparently that seems to be a common thread that seems to weave its way through our permit process. The other thing is I'm hearing a lot of is we have engineers out in the civilian world that certify plans and that type of thing. They come into the building department, and lo and behold, I guess that stamp is not good enough, and they've got to review them and completely change them over. That's the stories I'm hearing, but now that's whether it's true or not, I'd like to find out. It would seem a simple process if a plan or set of plans for a simple house has an engineering stamp on it by a certified engineer, that they should be able to get a permit in a reasonable amount of time, not weeks, but within days. The other thing I have is, and I guess, I don't know whether staffing level is accountable in there or not, but I think in the staffing levels, I think that we need to have better education. I know in a lot of areas where I come from, in the submarine world, people learn what everybody else's jobs involve. They're able to operate those different type of jobs, whether they're working machinery or they're working electronics or whatever. And I think that's another thing that maybe the planning department and resource management needs to look at, is be able to multitask their workers to do various jobs, whether it may be at the front counter or maybe it's checking plans, or is the engineering stamp on this, is it a legal stamp? Being able to put the plans out and get a permit in a reasonable amount of time. I think that's a valid statement that needs to be looked into. And then the bottom line that I see is, and it kind of hits me, that common sense. And I think that's something that a lot of us today, it just doesn't happen. And I think that's a main ingredient. Common sense needs to be looked at, and I think we can simplify our process by some common sense and looking at various items that doesn't necessarily have to be in the structure of how we do business. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman, for tonight.
Thank you, Supervisor Morgan. Supervisor Kehoe, please.
Thank you, Chairman Baugh. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This evening we heard comments from 22 individuals, and I think all of the board members appreciated those comments. I am particularly attracted to the observations that Ms. Machado made. She's provided those in writing to us, and I found that most valuable. Mr. Walker's comments, I think, were intuitive and right on the mark concerning the general plan, the zoning ordinances, and the departmental standards. I was disappointed, and I'm going to speak very candidly, I was disappointed in hearing the observations of Mr. Ball when he, and I have no reason to not agree with him, but when he said that our attitude, our disposition is that the customer is always wrong. And that requires some attention. He mentioned that if people complain, they're being blackballed, and again, that shouldn't happen. I am particularly attracted to the observations that Mr. Diaz made relative to the planning department and the building department, and maybe we ought to look at that and consider making some changes there. Mr. Carr mentioned the value, and others did also, the value of establishing citizens committees to help us and give us advice, and both for the planning department and I assume the building department. I think it's obvious to everyone in this room that the status quo is not acceptable.
That's right.
The number one question, and no one talked about it this evening, but let me bring it up. The number one question is, does this Board of Supervisors have the corporate will to make changes?
That's right.
And if we don't, then let's all get up and walk out the door. But I believe that this Board of Supervisors, with your help, will make valuable changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Kehoe. Supervisor Modi, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I have a number of observations, but I'm going to hold them for now. I thought your point earlier to Mr. Simon was a good point. I would like to hear from him. I agree with you. I don't think he needs to try to individually respond to the statements made because, as you pointed out, they're stories. They could be the whole story, part of the story. I don't know what they are. I don't think that they would know off the top of their head. But I'm really curious more in him bringing us up to speed on where we are with some of the current changes that have been being made with our system and some of our processes that we have and what progress we've made over the last couple of months. So I'd like to hear that first before I go to my comments. So thank you.
Okay, so at Supervisor Modi's request, we're going to welcome Mr. Simon, and I'm going to weigh in as Mr. Simon is coming. I would ask that you summarize and be direct. I'm personally not interested in a filibuster. We had about 20, 30 minutes last time. It was too much. So let's get to the point. Let's address your thoughts in a more concise manner. And frankly, we were also told at our last meeting that things that were shared actually didn't happen when they did. That chicken coop story is absolutely true. And you said it didn't exist. That was an email that came from some Supervisor Rickert, and she just confirmed that again. We do not approve all of our solar in 1 week, and you said that we did. Since then, I've had probably 30 calls saying that while it's a lot better and they're grateful, that that's simply not the truth, that there are many delays. And you also stated at the last time when you came before us that there was nothing ever held up because of Google Earth, and that is simply not the case. Ms. Machado has 100 folks that have filed complaints with her in Shasta Voices and shared many of those with me. I say that because I don't want to hear what you want to happen. I agree with what you want to happen. I want to hear how we deal with what is happening. There are some great people working in this department, but it doesn't do any good to pretend that we don't have challenges. So with that, you can take it wherever you want to, Mr. Simon. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Modi, for inviting me up to speak. Obviously, there are those on the board who would probably rather me not. I've heard several things, and I want to thank those in the audience who have spoken. I appreciate that you do have experiences and stories that you feel frustrated with. And those things are relevant to us as well, us meaning the department and me personally as the director. I would like to know more about those stories. Some of those stories I do know more about, and I do know that, thank you, David, that there are always a couple of different sides to a story, at least. In any case, let me get to some of the reasons that Supervisor Modi invited me up here. We do have a solar process in place that is a streamlined permitting process, and for the most part, it works. We limit our parcel research to those areas where the solar is being installed, whether that be on a structure or on the ground, and those generally take about a week to process at this time. That has not always been the case. We also process building permits in about a 4 to 6 week period of time. That has not always been the case. One of the main reasons for the delays, and I will be the first to admit that the delays were unacceptable for probably the last couple of years, where people were waiting for 10, 12, 16 weeks to get a permit just through the first review. That was frustrating for us, too. There were a number of things that happened within the department that all kind of came together at a very inopportune time. But the main thing that occupied most of our time was the transition from a electronic permitting system that had been in place since the middle 90s to a web-based or internet-based system that is now online and has been online for the last 2 months. And I will have one of our heavy users, Adam Fiesler, who will be describing that in a little bit more detail for you to explain some of the benefits of that new system. Solar process in place. We have an as-built amnesty, quote-unquote, process in place. where people are still charged a permit process, but they are not permit fee, but they are not charged a penalty fee, provided that they are not the one who built the unpermitted structure to begin with. So in most cases, we find that people who purchase new properties inherit some of those problems. And those are not the people that we want to hold responsible for not getting the proper permits. We have a permit system in place that will apply reasonable code standards to ensure that basic life safety things are addressed. If it was built before a certain amount of time, then we will use the 1997 code. If it was built after that period of time, then we will use current codes, but still within reason. We will work with them, their contractors, and their engineers to determine what was built, when, and how, what materials were used, and what methods were used. And we do employ a great deal of leniency in terms of bringing those up to code. It's our intent to have people living in safe structures, and that it's our, in fact, responsibility to ensure that that is the case. We have an emergency provision ordinance that the board adopted probably in 2013 or 14, that when there is a natural disaster and an emergency declared within the county, people can rebuild structures on a streamlined permit process, where a nonconforming building may have burned down in a fire, and under the strict provisions of the code, that nonconforming building could not be rebuilt if it was damaged beyond a certain threshold. Under these provisions, it can be rebuilt. We also provide for expedited permit processing and working with insurance companies and so forth to try to assist people in the best way that we can. The board adopted that, as I say, in 2013 or 14, and it's been in place since that time. The Track It system, I will just briefly explain, is the new permitting system that the county, that Resource Management is employing now. Several of the advantages are there will be more inline or online applications where people can apply, pay fees, send it in, get approval, and print their permits right from the comfort of their own home office. That will be coming online probably towards the end of June. We have the ability then to email, text, and text people in terms of where their permits are in the process. As it goes through the different phases, they will be updated on a regular basis. They will be able to access the system itself and follow the workflow of their permits to determine where it is in the process. If they have any questions, they can email those in or text or come into the office still. We will still be there and still be available. And better access to permit history on the part of our permit specialists who work the front counter, where a lot of the information that has been stored on paper or microfiche has been, we've been in the process for the last year and a half of digitizing that. And so that will be accessible to both the public and to folks at the counter at the county. Those are a couple of the things. If you're interested in hearing more details on any of those, I have staff here that can address those issues. I'll keep it brief and then leave it up to you if you would like to hear more about the improvements that we are already making.
Thank you. Supervisor Moody?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Simon. I appreciate the fact, and I just will add one comment. I know that we've heard a lot of different stories, and I'm sure there's a lot of truth and feelings involved in it, and I don't doubt what people are saying. I will say I've had some people call me and tell me that although they've had issues in the past, particularly as you mentioned over the last 2 years, and there were probably some of the same complaints we heard tonight, I did get phone calls and people have told me in the last month or so they have seen a change in some of the performance and the timelines that are out there because, I think, of the new system. So I think some of the changes that are being made are on the right process. I'd like to turn to our county council for a minute and ask a question about something that's been brought up a number of times, not only tonight but previously by this board and on other meetings, is the issue of the code compliance amnesty program, Google Earth. My question for you, county council, is liability-wise, where does the county stand when there are unpermitted or unsafe structures out there and we choose to turn the blind eye? Where does that put us? That's why you're the attorney.
Yeah. I guess having been considering it right now, I guess the short answer is it depends. And it does. It really, to a certain extent, a lot of it depends upon what the requirements are. You can have situations where there's probably not too much direct liability to the county just because there are immunities that exist and so forth and so on. But there are requirements, of course, that you don't want to issue a permit and say something is legal when you know it's not. Now, I'm not talking about, well, there's other violations. It's like, well, I can't say that this is a legal thing. There can be concerns along those lines. At the same time, you don't want to be issuing permits that say something is legal when it is not. And I can't say how much liability that may create, but it certainly can cause some difficulties down the line.
Okay. And I think, as someone mentioned, several people mentioned, kind of the common sense approach. I could see situations where if we perhaps find some kind of small structure, whether it be the hog pen or the chicken coop or the wood storage thing, that maybe that's something we're not overly concerned about, and maybe there's ways for us to, whether it be an amnesty program or something that protects us from that. But on the flip side of that, I would be really concerned, I think, if there was habitable structures that we came across that did have issues and we did nothing. Because I don't want to be responsible as a supervisor for someone being killed in a structure that burns down or falls down because it's not safe.
No, certainly there could be serious concerns if you have a true public health or safety issue and things are ignored.
Okay. Thank you. Just to add my comments to the others, I agree. I think our appeals process needs to be streamlined, and perhaps I don't know how expensive, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's too expensive, but it needs to be streamlined. I think the issue about the fees and stuff, there are some fees that I wonder about, like the land division fee. That certainly strikes me as being very high. But I will say, and someone brought it up and sort of mentioned the supervisor, and it was aimed at me or not, but the issue will be if we restructure our department and reduce the way we pay for it, which is through the user's fee, the permit fees, whatever it might be, there's only one place that money is coming from, and that's the general fund. Right. It's coming from the general fund. And just so you understand, about 85% of our discretionary dollars comes from public safety, goes to public safety. So that's where the money is coming from. I just want people, there's just not a whole lot of choices, unless maybe you guys could take it from the library or something. So,
excuse me, please. We're going to hear from the supervisors right now. Thank you.
I don't know that, I would just disagree with that comment. So I am concerned. I'm not saying we shouldn't. I'm just saying that just need to know the ramifications if you go down that path. I like someone talked about more standardized process across the jurisdictions. I think it would be worthwhile for us to explore with the other 3 cities and see if there are areas that we can standardize in our process, so when a contractor or developer goes to one jurisdiction and operates a certain way that he goes to the other one, it's pretty much the same way. I don't think it should be where each one is unto itself. I think there might be some possibilities. I know we've had some conversations in the recent past with one of the cities about maybe having that. I think that's something we ought to explore. I've always wondered why the records in the assessor's office is not always accessible by those in the building department when there's issues about when something was permitted or built, and then if they're being taxed on it, go ask the assessor, but somehow the building department can't look at those. And I heard there was some law or something. I'd like to find out, maybe our county council can research that. There's some way that we have better access for our building officials to look at those records, and that would save sending the customer back and forth to all these different departments. And as far as restructuring resource management, whether it be building and planning separate or something, you got environmental health, I'm going to have to ask you, Mr. Lees, to do some more research. Now, I know that my understanding of the reason why it was all joined up together was to reduce some overhead costs, administrative costs, and put it all under one roof. I'd be curious to see if that's still the best way to go, or perhaps there is some better use to restructure that in some way to get a better service to our customers on issues that are related to building, perhaps. And maybe, as Mr. Diaz said, planning is a different animal, and then, of course, environmental health is totally different. Maybe there's something we should be looking at that in a different way. And then the last thing I think was brought up, and I think this is, I think it's being done, I think it's an ongoing process, is the continuing education of our employees, whether it be the planning department, building department, or any other department for that matter. I think if there's something more that we can do or should be doing to make sure that the more the employees are, whether it be cross-trained or more familiar with the latest changes. I know the codes change a lot. The state does it and hands them to us. I'd like to see if there's a process where employees or customers come in, clients come in, and talk to one employee, and if they talk to another employee, they get the same answer. I think that's really important. And I think one of the things that was mentioned before, and I mentioned myself on a number of occasions, whether it be the book, maybe it was you that mentioned the book, Mary, I think we should have a check-off list that when they come in, that the people in our department can look at and go, it might be 78 things, I'm not sure what it will be, but they would go down and at least that would make them think, well, does that apply or not apply? And go down that list, and then maybe out of that list, maybe only 22 things apply or something, but so that they can walk out with their hands saying, okay, these are the things I have to do to get through the process. I will wrap up with saying if it's possible to get plan reviews done in a week, I think that's great. One gentleman mentioned 2 hours. I'm not sure if we could quite make that happen, but I think that process, I know some of the steps you're taking on some of the smaller things. I think Mary mentioned a couple of things I thought were great ideas, as well as some of the smaller things that can be a quicker turnaround and a process to get them off our staff's table and so they can address the more serious things. Thank you, Mr. Ball.
Thank you. Supervisor Modi, do you have any other questions for Mr. Simon?
No, I do not.
Thank you, Mr. Simon.
I would like to add I'm not offering a legal opinion, but there are liabilities with not addressing unpermitted structures, but the county code itself in several sections indicates that no official of the county, including a planning director or a building official, shall issue any permits if there are violations of any part of the county code on a property. So that's a county policy as well. So it's
and that's a good point. I think that's the part that Mr. Cruz will have to take into his consideration when he reviews the policies to see where we stand legally on some of these issues. Because I really am concerned that we just don't put ourselves in a position where we don't want to be down the road.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Simon. So I'm going to take the opportunity to weigh in, and I'll segue with the very code that Mr. Simon's referring to, Chapter 16. Mr. Fletcher was kind enough to furnish a copy of that to me. And frankly, we do need to, as a Board of Supervisors, review that entire code section and modify it. It does indeed prohibit reasonable decisions. I believe that our very capable inspectors should be empowered to be able to make a reasonable determination that something as silly as a chicken coop would not hold up another permit process. I find myself totally agreeing with you, Supervisor Modi, when it comes to structures that we live in. They need to be well thought out and permitted properly. I don't think anybody in this room is complaining about that. But the challenges that are associated with permitting improvements, frankly, I'll just take a wild stab at it. There must be 10,000 unpermitted structures in Shasta County, and there must be thousands of them dating back and pre-existing our codes, even some historical buildings, the Igo Inn. Do you really want an elevator in the Igo Inn? The answer is no. If you're going to rehab an historic structure, you want it to look like and act like and feel like and smell like an historic structure. You don't want it rehabbed and have it stuccoed and have it end up looking like every other building in Shasta County. We need to take a look at some of the individual codes that direct people like Mr. Simon and change that direction. This board, as Mrs. Machado said, does have the ability to redirect and to if you will, allow me this term, to re-imprint this entire department. So the other thing I'll weigh in on is Supervisor Kehoe made the observation, and I'm going to 100% agree with it. In fact, I'm going to ask that this entire board agree with it. We have been furnished a lot of suggestions. They are all recapped very well in this one document, almost all of them with the exception of perhaps realigning the department or reforming the department. Everything else is really covered here that has been talked about this evening from most of the folks, with the exception of Mr. Walker. He had some other concepts that are not covered here, and I did like his as well. I would like to suggest that this board could find agreement, not necessarily with each of the individual items that are contained here, but that we could find agreement to direct Mr. Lees to tear this apart, perhaps spend some additional time with not just Shasta voices, but the many voices that are represented in our community. The observation was made, perhaps an engineer, perhaps a builder, perhaps a contractor, folks that could weigh in on these thoughts and tell us whether or not there is merit. I do believe, even if it creates difficulty for us, I do believe that we should review the fees and the mitigation fees that exist. And I know the position that puts us in as a board. It means that we have less resources for public safety, and I am Mr. Public Safety Advocate here, but fair is fair. They have not been reviewed, and we should ask that they be reviewed. That's just my opinion, and it takes at least two more on this board to agree with that. So I would like to see that. And then I'm going to address the white elephant in the room. And this is going to be difficult, but I'll try to do it as professionally as possible. The reason that this became a public conversation is because of opportunity. We have the pending retirement of our resource management director, and that means that this board, as many have mentioned, will be tasked with the responsibility of finding a replacement for Mr. Simon, and it has to be somebody that, frankly, will take all of these observations that you all made here tonight and maybe reshape this department. If we can express enough direct intention from this board, we could direct a different focus, a different vision for planning and for resource management. I do believe we should look at restructuring the department. It is cumbersome at the very basic level. Environmental health, I don't think, belongs in resource management. Perhaps it belongs in public health, and that could be on a more professional basis rather than directed under resource management. Now, I don't know all of the answers there, but I do believe it's worth taking a look at, folks, and we have the ability to direct whether or not we even take a look at that. I think it should be a simpler process, and I think there should be more direct authority given separately in the building department and separately in the planning department so that folks can have their issues addressed. Now, that's my layman's observation. I'm sure that professionals can come up with 100 reasons why that doesn't make sense, but I'll stick my neck out there and tell you I think it's worth investigating that. I think we should put the time and effort into it. Also, I just need to say this. I'm not content with waiting until we find a new resource management director. And I think that the changes that we're talking about and that you are all discussing and envisioning here should not come at the direction and under the direction of our current management. We are here because of the challenges, and frankly, I do believe that we'd be better served if we gave authority to Mr. Lees to take a look at some of these issues, hire sooner rather than later. And I believe that not only the public deserves answers and directions from us sooner rather than later, I also believe the amazing staff that works in the department should not have their life put on perpetual hold, dependent on the outcome of who might be hired in that department. I think we should give Mr. Lees the authority to begin this process now and improve and direct changes now rather than waiting for 3 months, hire somebody else. It takes them a year to get up to speed, and then we're down the road another year and a half, and nothing really has changed. So personally, and that's just one person, I'm advocating for more immediate change. I'll just tell you that I'm sorry to say that I can no longer work with our current director. I think you obviously saw the challenges that I expressed here in my conversation publicly. I have been the recipient of what I believe are inappropriate response from Mr. Simon, and frankly, I'm tired of having to copy Mr. Lee's on every email.
Mr. Ball,
I'm talking.
I know you are. Do you really want to go here?
I do.
Okay.
I have gone there.
All right.
I no longer want to have to, on behalf of the constituents of Shasta County, copy Mr. Lee's on every single darn email I send, because if I don't, I won't get a response. It's time for that to end. I think about it this way. If I'm a sitting supervisor, if I'm chairman of the Board of Supervisors, and I can't find a solution, how do any of you folks hope to ever stand a chance to get your challenges answered? I'm sorry, but that needs to be said, regardless of whether that's a pleasant thing to say or whether it's easy to say. And I don't mean, I think Mr. Simon's brilliant, but I do believe it is time for change. And I am advocating that change now rather than later. I have to tell you, I'm grateful for some recent resolution, and I will agree with you, Mr. Simon, on the changes you've made. They are very pleasant, and like yourself, I've received many calls saying thank you for the sped-up process, and that I will thank you personally, in fact, your entire staff, for that. But I believe that we could do better, and I believe we can do better now. Thank you. Supervisor Kehoe, to be followed by Supervisor Modi, please.
Thank you, Chairman Baugh. Just an observation. In my mind, it does not serve us well as a board or as a county to become engaged in character assassination. Now, I think what is required of us this evening is a demonstration of will, an acknowledgement that the status quo will no longer suffice. So, consistent with observations that others on this board have made, I will move that this board request that Mr. Lees, in concert with whatever resources you deem appropriate, to examine the situation in the department and bring forth in a timely fashion recommendations for us to consider. That's my motion.
I'll second that.
There's a motion and second. Under discussion, Supervisor Modi, please.
Yeah, I think Mr. Lee's to the next few months, and really it's only 2 months now. I think we're about 2.5 months before Mr. Simon leaves us. I think someone pointed out, I think one of the biggest issues that we could tackle as a board are the flaws in our system. And one was mentioned about whether or not we need to look at our general plan and see if it needs to be redone or not. But obviously, the zoning is a big issue, and that's something we as a board can do. It doesn't have to require us to wait for anybody, whether some are the ordinances. And then I think even the point that Mr. Simon brought up when he indicated the code that says the restrictions that past boards have put on his and his department's performance to follow certain rules and guidelines, that if the county set those rules, then we have handicapped them from the very start, and we need to look at that and see if that's not appropriate anymore and move forward. So I would look forward to that.
Other conversation or observations?
Yeah, I do have one more, and I'll just be very brief. I'm very troubled by the fact that you would personally single out Mr. Simon and do what you did tonight, and I wish you would be as forceful and direct about the sheriff and his performance.
Mr. Chairman, I call for the question.
So we have a motion and a second. Is it clear what the motion is, Mr. Cruz?
Yeah, Mr. Lees understands it, and I understand the motion. And so unless any board member needs any further clarification, I believe it's time for an appropriate vote.
Very good. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to again thank you for taking the time to attend this evening. This is the public process, as muddy as it is and as difficult as it is to have these conversations publicly. It is well worth the time and effort. The observation was made that we should do this more often. We will be doing it more often. The next public meeting, and I'll give a nod to Supervisor Kehoe, has been set for June 26th as a special meeting of the Board of Supervisors from 5 to 7 p.m. in this office. This is Public Safety Workshop 2. We'll continue our original discussion from a couple months ago regarding public safety. With that, we'll go ahead and adjourn. Thank you.